there's a real low health literacy in the US and I'm sure outside of the US also. And when you have low health literacy, misinformation has an opportunity to take hold because you really don't have a framework to sort of say, well, that actually doesn't make sense because I know that this is how scientifically it's supposed to work. Or that really doesn't make sense because I know, viruses don't work like that. And so I'm wondering, AJI is educational. It is here to sort of, journalism is part of the role is to educate. And so I'm curious, how do you see the role of journalism and health literacy in the effort to combat misinformation? Anybody can take the
I'll jump in because that's what we spend a lot of our time working on. I started journalism in the 90s, so I understand at least parts of the evolution of it. And unfortunately, I think too often that journalists haven't caught up with what wellness influencers understood a number of years ago, which is charisma and binaries of just presenting things in easily digestible chunks. It's been a real challenge for the many amazing science communicators that we've hosted on the podcast and that I've spoken with over the years. And I think that unfortunately, I don't see a lot of legacy media really living up to this moment right now. To like, for example, calling RFK a vaccine skeptic constantly, which just does not define the terms. So unfortunately, it's really left up for people on their own because one thing I do know is powerful is many of the science communicators, a number of who are on this call, are very good at presenting information. And we also have that power of charisma and honesty that we can help to mobilize people in the communication mediums that we have. But if we're going to look to if we're going to look to the bigger companies right now, it's just going to be very difficult. So it really is grassroots in that sense
Mm.
from where I'm looking at things.
What have you found has been effective in actually building trust, creating a relationship where people actually listen to you?
I think Dan Wilson should answer that. He's built up his YouTube page. He started shortly after we started, and he definitely has a parasocial audience who
All right, Dan,
willing
why don't you
to
come off mute and let us
listen to
know?
him.
I mean, I think the approach I've taken is just to try to let the people making the claims make the claims as they make them. And then I use whatever resources I have at my disposal, be it scientific literature, be it um, a science communicator who wrote an article, and I try to distill that information to directly address what the person has said. But it's been hard because it hasn't felt like enough. I didn't start my YouTube channel to get a big following, but my following is, I'm just making the point that my following is not nearly as big as people like Andrew Huberman or like Joe Rogan or what is it now? Diary of a CEO, all these people who are platforming these alternative health views and making claims that are not based in science. It's hard to compete with them,
Hmm.
mainly because, well, it's not my full-time job to do this. I do this all on the side. I have a regular job and I have two kids, and it takes up a lot of my time. Whereas a lot of these alternative health influencers do this full time or are funded well enough that they can dedicate a lot more time to it.
Yeah, I
Um,
love how you call them alternative health influencers, but I do feel that
yeah,
sense where you're almost trying to do this with one hand behind your back.
yeah, for sure. But I think moving forward, people can maybe chime in on what they think about this. But one thing that I think needs to, that I want to try at least moving forward, is having more direct conversations with people. I think that, well, I'm no longer on Twitter, but while I was on there, I think having spaces where people could come up and make a claim, and you could
Mhm.
have a room full of scientists and experts, and that room full of scientists and experts can address that claim, post links, discuss data, and if not convince the person that they're wrong, then at least show the audience that when pressed, when properly questioned, when their feet are held to the fire, these people make these claims don't really know what they're talking about. I think that's valuable for people to at least see. So it's something that I want to do on YouTube, doing a live like call-in show where people call in and
Yeah.
I can talk to them one-on-one. And research actually shows that sustained conversations over long periods of time with people is a viable way to eventually change minds.
Yeah, and one thing that I personally have found in my experience is that what we label as people being misled or misinformed, they don't necessarily label themselves that way. Um, Most people that I talk to who are misled think they actually know better. But
Hmm.
when they have the opportunity to actually have the sort of veil lifted, there I have found, and tell me if anybody in the room agrees or disagree, I have found that there's actually a desire to learn more, that the intention, in fact, is not to engage in misinformation, but rather to find genuine information. And it's this sort of, I don't know where to look. I don't know what's real. I don't know how to distinguish between something that is generally inaccurate, but maybe has some accuracy in it. There's a lot of manipulation opportunity in there. And so if you work with people and you're able to sort of help them figure it out, I have personally found that there is an interest in actually figuring it out. Have people here found something similar? David, I saw you nodding. Wendy, I saw you nodding. Wendy, what do you have to say? Oh,
I uh, during the pandemic, I talked to a lot of people about vaccination, and just I'm an anthropologist by training, so I'm used to talking directly to people, and sometimes I was able to actually explain the science in a way that I could make them begin to understand, and I had a wonderful conversation that went on for about 45 minutes with a man who said, "Why should I trust the government? They look at what they did in Tuskegee. I don't trust them." And I had to say, "Look, I can't disagree with anything you're saying, but let me explain the science to you, and let me assure you, I have a pregnant daughter-in-law. I wanted her to get vaccinated." And ended up by saying to him, "I ask you from the bottom of my heart to protect yourself and consider getting a vaccine for you and for your family." And he said to me, "I'm going to do that. I'm going to talk to my wife, and I'm taking you very seriously." And I felt that I had got through to him and to some others. But how do you get through to a whole large audience, many of whom turn you off right away? Oh, it's a vaxxer. Forget it.
right.
That's the problem. One on one is not so difficult. When you can talk to somebody with sincerity and passion, and they see that you mean deeply what you're saying and that you care about them. But how do you communicate in an
How do you
article?
do that at scale? That's one of the reasons that AJI has been founded, is to try to take a stab at that. So I do believe in the power of experimentation. I know, talking to a room full of scientists, that's not a scary word. And so I do feel like maybe this is the beginning of a laboratory that could reveal some interesting results.